Okay, good afternoon. Our guest today is Professor Stuart Rojstaczer. He is a retired hydrology professor from Duke University, and he is nationally known for his criticism of American academic system. His book, Forever Gone, The Golden Age of American Universities, and in particular for his criticism of the grade inflation, which is a big problem in many universities and colleges. But he is here at UWM today because of his new book, a fiction book called The Mathematician's Shiva. So my first question is, why would a hydrology professor write a fiction book?
I've always written fiction on and off, so it was nothing new, and I've avidly read fiction ever since I was a teenager, so that's 40 years of reading. I love that art form, and I don't think I was particularly good at applying that art form myself, but in my 50s I found that I had a voice that I didn't have before, and I thought I had something that was good enough to be published that other people might want to read.
Mm-hmm. I actually read your book, and I think it belongs to several trends, the intersection of several trends.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, of course, it belongs to this American Jewish literature. We know all these great names like Saul Bellow and Chaim Potok and so on. Second, perhaps it belongs also to this new, very popular trend of the immigrant literature. There is this, Jim Plachuri with the namesake. There is some Russian American literature in English. And in particular, for example, we can mention Edward Frenkel, who wrote Math and Love and Math, mm-hmm. right? His famous book about mathematics. And that perhaps the third line, that mathematics, science, scientific discovery. So where do you think your book belongs?
I think all three. I would hope all three. It was my desire to look at the American immigrant experience. What immigrants' experience do I know best personally? Well, it's not the Anglican immigrant experience. That's not my background. It's very strongly Jewish. So write about what you know. I wanted to look at the American Jewish experience through an immigrant's eyes. That's something I know intimately well. And because I have this science and math background, I've always, in the back of my mind, not always, for the last 40 years, ever since the publication of a book called Gravity's Rainbow, which is a novel, have been interested in the idea of maybe merging mathematics with fiction, which is something that Thomas Pynchon did in that book, and that's how I came up with this
mm-hmm.
one.
So your background, as far as I understand, is Polish Jewish, right?
Exactly.
So why did you decide to write about Russian Jewish experience rather than, say, Polish Jewish?
I hedged, okay, in that I put these characters in a part of Eastern Poland that was once Poland and is now, part of Ukraine, but was also part of the Soviet Union. I wanted to do that for American audiences. They seem to have a better experience, understanding of Russian culture than they do Polish culture, and so I wanted them an entryway into Eastern European culture that they were at least somewhat familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So I put it in that region of Poland. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So to some extent you speak about the status of mathematics in the Soviet Union and this type of things. You have some irony about intellectualism in America, and in Soviet Russia it's supposed to be opposite perhaps. So you say, for example, that President Gorbachev would come to Professor Kolmogorov's funeral, which is not true.
It's fiction,
which is
yes.
not true.
But that's my artistic license, yes. To exaggerate is my artistic license, yes.
So I think part of it was Cold War, and certainly math and physics were very popular with authorities, but that was because of the nuclear bomb, this type of things, which you don't mention actually.
No, I softened the desire on the part of the Soviets for mathematical and engineering expertise as being some sort of intellectual and aesthetic desire when it was far more practical in motivation. Yes, mm-hmm. That's true.
Mm-hmm. Now, the main character of your book, Rachel,
or Ruchela if you are from Poland, mm-hmm. Jewish, yes.
So she solved a millennium problem, a very famous, one of 7 very famous mathematical problems.
She's rumored to have solved this problem.
Yes.
Okay.
So certainly the personality which comes in mind is Grisha Perelman, who really solved several years ago a millennium problem. And he also decided not to publish it, so he also kind of strange personality for, he decided not to accept any money, any prizes, and not to publish his proof. Do you think there is something common between them?
Well, certainly I drew upon experiences in contemporary and modern mathematics and the personalities in contemporary and modern mathematics, in particular Russian mathematics, to draw my characters. So there are people like Perelman and there are people like Arnold who are influential in the character development here. Are they 100% those characters? Certainly not. Are they fictionalized versions? No, but there are elements of those people in those characters. And I did talk to students of Kolmogorov about what Kolmogorov was like as a person, and not only learned about Kolmogorov, but I think in talking to those people, use their characters themselves in these stories, or their personalities in these stories.
So in a sense, you combine an image of a crazy professor with an Yiddish mama, right?
Exactly. Although a very strong-willed, not all that sentimental Yiddish mama. Okay. And then if you look at this character let's step back. If my mother were alive today and were to read this book, she would not say that I'm basing this character on any Russian mathematicians. She would say that character is 100% me, okay, she would say. And what I've done is given her a PhD and mathematical prowess that she does not possess. There's some truth to that, but I would counter, if she were alive today, that it's about 60% her and 40% other people. Yes.
So you think this story is absolutely possible, what you describe in your book, this could happen, that somebody proves an important theorem and decides not to publish it?
Certainly. There would be people with the predisposition and with the personality to want to publish, to want to work on something for its aesthetic value only, and either out of spite, which is the case of Ruchala Karnakovich, or just out of their own personal desire not to have any sort of accolades, just solve it, right?
No,
and not reveal
it. But in science, usually, unless you publish something, unless it's accepted by public, by the community, it's not completed.
Correct. But if you have a certain eccentric personality, you don't care what the public thinks. You know you have solved it, right? And there are certainly people like that, yes. Yeah. It is possible. Now, would it have been possible for someone like that, like Rachela Karnakovich, to exist in the 40s, 50s, and 60s? They would have had to have been a superhuman intellect and a incredible near-mythic character. And that's probably why there were no Rachela Karnakoviches at that time, right? They would have to be the greatest minds of their generation and have skin like that of a rhinoceros to deal with all the difficulties that they would have to face. But that's part of what writing fiction is about, right? It's about the world of possibility and to create mythic characters if you need to do so, yes.
How much time did you spend on that? I'm wondering, how long does it take to write a book like that?
Well, let's see. First you have to get your data, which means you have to read about stuff, right? And I knew I wanted to write about mathematicians, and my mathematics background is good, and I know mathematicians who are Eastern European. I know them pretty well, Hungarian mathematicians. Okay, it's not Russian. So I know their culture pretty well. But I needed to look at the history, and I needed to get better versed in mathematics. I needed to look at some tapes of Holocaust survivors and their stories in Vorkuta, videotapes. So that probably took about half a year, and then writing took about another year and a half. Then I gave it to some friends. I thought it was perfect. They said no. So I had to rewrite upon their recommendations. So then I had to give it to my agent. My agent said the last third was terrible, so I had to change that. That took another 2 months. Then my editor wanted changes. When you add it all up together, it's probably about a 3-year project. Yeah.
Okay, and given what you write about the great inflation and all these problems of American universities and science these days, do you think a story like that is possible in the 21st century? Where are we going at all? And are you optimistic about science and academia?
Well, there's always an intellectual drive in any professor and any graduate student, and I'm optimistic that drive will always exist, and great work will always be done. But the bureaucracy will push against that, and that bureaucracy keeps getting bigger and bigger and less intellectually inclined, and the funding sources also become less intellectually inclined and more pragmatic. So there will be more barriers to making better discoveries and great discoveries, but those barriers won't be insurmountable. It just means that people will be slightly less productive intellectually than they once would be able to be.
Thank you very much, Professor Rojstaczer.